All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Deep Talks pod. You've got myself, Danny Wright, and Eric, and we've got Tony Smith on today. So I just want to make a little introduction to yourself. The self-proclaimed legacy architect, a part of the family legacy business, which you run, obviously, with your sons.
Yep.
Your wife, obviously, is involved as well. But just to start with, really, we just want to go back to why you have got into what you are doing now, where it all began from a young age, and just tell us a little bit of your story.
Okay. I came from I was born in Trafford Park. I don't know whether any of you know Trafford Park. You might know where Old Trafford is, but next to Old Trafford is a funny little place that was built by Henry Ford, which is First Avenue, Second Avenue, Third Avenue, 5th Street, 6th Street. I was born at 514 5th Street. Those houses were built by Henry Ford to work in his factory. It's coming up to the anniversary of the night that I was conceived. I was conceived on St. Patrick's Night in 1956. The conceptor, the male, promptly jumped on a boat to the USA when he found out that my mum was pregnant. So I could never work out how I was so close to my grandma. So I used to get the bus from Whitefield. We moved to Whitefield. I used to get the 84 bus from behind Kendall's and go to Trafford Park and see my grandma. 10 years later, I found my birth certificate on the top of the telly. And under father, it was blank. So I don't know whether you've watched any of these programs about illegitimate children from Irish families in the UK that were sent across to Ireland. Well, I could have been one of those. Other than Alice Kelly, my grandma. And she took her daughter, her pregnant 21-year-old daughter, under her wing and looked after her until she met, obviously, my dad. And my dad obviously took me in as his own. And if you think about it, this is not 1972. This is not 1982. This is not 1992. This is 1958. Now, how many people do you think took in mums with illegitimate children in 1958? Well, he did. And you would not have been able to tell that I was adopted. He treated me as his own, but he had ambition for me. He worked for a large organisation called Pifco. Does anybody remember Pifco? They used to make hair dryers and toasters in the days when you used to repair them. And they were a very strong company in North Manchester. And the bosses had a clear strategy. They didn't want their children working in the Pifco business. It was a merchant business. So what do you think all the owners of the business did? They sent them all to school. Which school did they send them to? They sent them to Manchester Grammar School. So they worked them hard so they could get qualifications. All those kids of the owners of that business became doctors and solicitors and accountants. They moved out of the trading world into the professional world, and that was seen as progress in the 1960s. And my dad, John, copied his bosses, and I ended up at a school called Bury Grammar School. We'd moved north, we'd gone from Cheetah Mill, we'd gone to Whitefield, and we went to Bury, and we ended up in Bury in a very nice house up north of Bury. So he had this plan. So his master plan was that I was going to be a solicitor. And I went all the way through to doing a law degree. So he nearly got his wish. He was ever so close to getting his wish because he'd worked really hard. He worked so hard to get me through exams. That was incredible. He was doing mental arithmetic with me. He was doing this. He was doing the other, just so I could pass this exam for this fancy school. And we did. We got in. Now, just as an aside, in those times, those grammar schools were not the elite, or they were not the exclusive places that they are now, because most of these grammar schools have disappeared, obviously, and the only grammar schools that exist now are private grammar schools, which I'm not particularly fond of that idea, because I think grammar schools were good places. I think you put all the clever people together and they get cleverer. But what happened was, these grammar schools, believe it or not, were means tested. So I can remember that my school fees were £187 a year. I think my dad was earning £15 a week. So if you work that out, there's no way he could pay £187. But what he did is he told the school, well, these are my earnings, and guess what? My fees were less than my dinner money.
Is that because you passed that exam to be clever enough to be accepted?
No, good question. Really, really good question. I was not bright enough to get a scholarship.
Right.
This is a really, really good question. I was not bright enough to get a scholarship. I literally scraped in. When I got in there, the classes were unstreamed. There were 32 people in each class. There were 96 people in the year. I was number 27. So I was one of the last 20 to get in. It didn't matter at that moment in time where I stood in the being bright, because I was one of the less bright. I scraped in. They simply said, what are your earnings? Here's our contribution to your fees. And that's how it worked. So literally I was paying, I don't know how much of the £187, I think we paid £27 a year or something like that, £30 a year. The way it works these days, and I'm involved in a school, so I sit on a committee that grants what are called bursaries. So bursaries are, if you've got somebody talented that wants to go into a certain school, let's say they're really good at sport, or they're really good at art, or they're really good at music, but their parents can't afford to send them to one of these grammar schools, one of these elite schools, then these schools have a process to get these really talented kids in. Now, why do they do that? One, there's a row at the moment as to whether there should be charities.
Sorry, so just putting it, see, like this subject here now, I feel like we wouldn't even know about this, would we? No. Do you know, and people from our background, you know, working class families, would not have a clue about that as an option.
Yeah.
That as an option, do you know what I mean? So in this day and age now, like obviously your father was somebody who was working within, say, an environment maybe where he had connections that did understand about this was an opportunity for you to get into. But this day and age now, like you wouldn't have a clue that could be an option for you to pursue. I would always thought you either pay your way or you're super clever and you get in. Only two options.
That's
do you know what I mean?
No, it's not. Well, the great thing is that system has kind of been perpetuated by the schools. Now, the schools have done it for a reason. Right. Because there's a big row as to whether I don't know whether you follow this. I only follow it because I was embroiled in it from being 11, if you think about it, so I know a lot about it. And I'm helping people do the same at my children's school. Now, at the moment, what they've done is they've just added VAT to the fees. That's causing mayhem. But the big thing is this charitable status thing, which is if they lose the charitable status thing, if they make a profit in a year, they won't be able to save it for next year for a rainy day. They'll have to pay tax on it. They'll have to pay corporation tax on it. And so these are mixed messages that are coming out from governments and I know why they do it, because these places look elite and exclusive and it's difficult to get in, but they don't go under the skin to appreciate. Now, there's a really good reason why these schools want these really bright, they want the best sportsmen, they want the best artists. They don't want them, they want them in. Why do they want them in? Because it makes everybody else better. It makes everybody else better. You've got a great sprinter, or you've got a great runner, or you've got a great, sportsman all round. They will lift. There's a guy called Charlie Brook that you might have heard of at the moment. He's breaking all sorts of records. He's breaking all sorts of records in the England cricket team. He was at school and he was brought up by his grandma. He was at school with my kids. He was brought up by his grandma. He's now in the England cricket team and killing it. But the reason it's where it's unfair, which is these guys do 2 hours of sport every day.
Yeah.
And that's why the sportsmen come out of there. It's not because they're favoured. It's just because the best get better, don't they? Or is it
Well, I think,
expertise 190, 1900 hours?
That's it. Like if it's like going back to say like my amateur career as a boxer, like I could be competing against the average national championship fighter who's entering the championships, could be competing against a full-time athlete who's part of GB, who's training 2 or 3 times a day, getting funded to train, and the competition there is a little bit uneven, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because then the person like myself, obviously, I beat everyone in GB at one stage due to the fact I put my life and soul into that, and I put my whole life on hold to be able to get to that level, to train twice a day and get to that point to be able to compete against these guys, because that's it. If you've got that opportunity to be able to do that, and that's what I'm saying now, if some kids who probably who maybe top at football or, like brilliant at whatever sport it might be, would see a school like that as an option. We don't even know it's an option. Do you know what I mean?
I certainly didn't know that myself. One thing I wanted to ask you is, obviously between your father, your grandmother and your mother, I feel like you've mentioned there your dad's been the one that's kind of shaped who you are today. How important would you say it is for kids growing up, especially in them early stages of life, to have a key, whether it's someone in the family or, the mother or the father, to be there for them and push them and keep nagging them to go and do something? You said there you ended up not pursuing that, becoming a solicitor.
Yeah.
But how important maybe was your dad to get you to where you are today, looking back on that?
Very. There's obviously a lot of debate on anywhere about the lack of father influences in lives, isn't there? And you look at that, and as a person, you want to go, can I help fix that? And I would love to be able to fix it, but it looks like you can only fix it one lad at a time, can't you? And how you're going to access, and it's like, you look at that. It's very interesting as to. I think the problem is that probably when you're a single parent, you also have to work. So actually, it's a no-parent family, and that makes it more difficult. When you're a 2-person family, you've got a mum and a dad, or a mum and a mum these days, or a dad and a dad these days. And then one person will take on one role and the other person will be the breadwinner, and therefore life is normal. But if you're a single parent family, you are being actually looked after probably most of the time by your grandparents. And how old are your grandparents? Your grandparents will be tired. My mum looked after one of my nieces and she was exhausted. And I think that's part of it. Yeah, a male influence. But if they're coming back into, say, grandma looking after the kids. My mum had me at 21. She was still looking after her granddaughter because my sister got divorced. My sister walked out on her husband. And so she is still parenting at 66. She's exhausted. She's been doing it all that time, and she didn't have a choice. And so I think that a male role will create a lot of positives. You know, even down to, did you all wrestle with your dad?
Yeah, I think your dad is,
and
as
that's what you miss, isn't there? There's a bloke, there's a bloke, and you do blokey things, and you watch the football, and you do things together. And
I think you said something earlier though about the word ambition. I think that's something that, not that your mother doesn't have that for you.
Yeah,
but your mother's more caring and wants you to be okay and wants you to be happy.
Yeah,
your dad, especially when you're young, and your dad wants you to be good at something. Your dad wants you to impress him a little bit.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And when you start impressing him, that's something that you will know as a father. And I know, look, with my dad, when my journey through my adolescence, the pride that gave my father just made him want to do more, made him want to give more, and made him want to be, do you know what I mean? And just then it's just like, I think that element of it is, as a father as well, it'd be something that you want for your children, that you want them to excel, you want them to be good at something, you want them to be proud of themselves, do you know what I mean, going forwards in life. And I think that's something that having the father figure, but also obviously the connection between the mother and father, or the two matriarchs within that family, gives you that. And you don't have to necessarily always be your father, does it? Like, I mean, it can be a role model who has got that passion for you, but it's hard to find that because you haven't got that maternal connection, if you know what I mean.
I was going to say that in that somehow these guys have got to get a substitute.
Yeah.
And that may be somebody at school, it may be a sports coach, it may be this, but it's a big responsibility for that person, isn't it? In that if somebody attaches themselves to their... So I was particularly fond of... He was hilarious, and this sounds very posh, but I was particularly fond of my Latin master, because he was hilarious and he drove tanks in the war. Now, how cool is that? Your Latin teacher drove tanks in the war, and he would spend half the Latin lesson telling you about stories of driving Churchill tanks that used to set on fire somebody would wave at it, it'd set on fire, you know, but he came through it all. And it's an interesting shout, because a lot of us went into the cadets because Jed, the tank driver, was high up in the cadets. So we all went to the cadets, and we all had Colonel Hyde, and he was brilliant as well. And it looked like a lot of the cool teachers were in the cadets. So all us, I don't want to go naughty lads, but those lads that weren't just academic, there was 120. It was bear in mind, this was voluntary. You could have gone home earlier in the day, but there was 100 out of 500 of us. There was 125 people that were in the cadets, and quite a few went in the army. So it's an interesting space when people talk about, national service. I think that would be the worst possible idea, but some element of being accountable, cleaning your shoes, ironing your uniform, learning to play a drum, marching together. It's a very 1950s, 1960s concept. But I don't think it's a bad thing.
Time's coming back onto that. Yeah. I think that people are seeing the value in that. I think a lot of young people now are looking at the state of the world, of the way that things are, and they're seeing, maybe, I mean, I wouldn't say my parents aren't old, but they're the older generation who were brought up by the older generation. And I can see, I had a lot of that instilled in me, luckily. And you probably have yourself, from your background, 100%. But a lot of people are missing that with maybe younger parents and younger grandparents. Do you know what I mean? So that element of looking back, and now you see the value of actually them old-fashioned values and old-fashioned traditions. And
how many? What happened to the Cubs? Remember the Cubs? I don't know whether the Cubs were around when you guys were around.
They was around when I was a kid. But there's certain little things like that. I think these values that they instill.
Get a badge. Get a badge. Get a stripe. These shoes aren't clean. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like a reward system, isn't it? Rather than it being negative, it's like a reward. You do something that's good and you get a reward for it, and then you learn that behaviour. It becomes intrinsic and pleasing, doesn't it?
I still can't iron a shirt. I still can't iron a shirt.
Moving on from the cadets there, and obviously it'll link into health as well. I can see you've got a Whoop band on. How do you reckon health and fitness and taking care of yourself has impacted your human performance for work in your profession? outside of the gym?
Incredibly up and down. Seriously up and down. The danger, at one stage I was more than, I don't know what it is in kilos, boys, but I was more than 19 stone at one stage. So when work can take over. If you go into these corporates, do they manipulate you? I think they manipulate you. Do they do it on purpose? I'm not sure. Is there some baddie inside a corporate manipulating everybody? No. Is there a tribal way of doing things where you are expected to be, first philo, first in, last out, working silly hours, all those sorts of things? And in some organisations, there ain't any time to go to the gym. And then some organisations want this culture where you eat and you drink and you go to fine restaurants. It was not surprising that I was nearly 20 stone. And I have because of probably my background and working in what I would call quite a commission-only environment, the willpower, you switch on, you switch off. So I can lose weight. I can lose weight by not eating. So I went on a lighter life. I don't know whether you ever know what a lighter life was. It was shakes instead of food. It was 3 shakes a day. And I could do that. So it fell off. The weight fell off. I did very little exercise. It fell off. But guess what? When I went back on food.
Yeah. So this is something obviously we
went straight back on.
Yeah, we speak about this a hell of a lot to people and stuff, and that type of ethos and mentality is, when it comes to your health and fitness, so counterproductive.
Yeah.
And it's so unhealthy. Do you know what I mean? Because all you're doing is starving your body. And if someone like yourself who's clearly got extremely good willpower and someone who can probably put the mind to many things and do it, you can easily do that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can do that, but does that make it the right thing to do?
Yeah.
Totally not. But then obviously you've learned from that experience, from being like obese pretty much.
Underage.
Obese.
Properly obese.
Yeah.
Not just marginal, not just one, I'm not like my BMI is 30. I said, no, I was big. I was horrible. Yeah.
And then you've learn how to, lose weight properly. You know, I know that obviously you train with me now and you're active and you do what you do. I just want to touch there. So you obviously mentioned your corporate background. Well, I want to kind of get the story from what you entered.
Yeah.
At the beginning to then obviously the business that you run now with your family. Yeah. So give us the story on that, please.
Yeah. So if you remember, I go back to my dad, who wanted me to be a solicitor. Well, I did a law degree and I decided that it wasn't for me. The law, I found it a bit boring, even the crime. The crime was quite interesting, but everything else was like contract this, contract that, property this. So it was boring. I did a bit of work experience and I decided I didn't want to be a lawyer. All I wanted to do, really, I was a camp counsellor. Do you remember? You were way before your time. There used to be an organisation called BUNAC, British Universities North America Club. They would pay for you to go and be in America. They'd pay for you to be a camp counsellor in the US. So I just signed up for that. I didn't even go and get my degree. I went to America and became a camp counsellor. So that is one of these things where the Americans from New York send their children away for 6 weeks so they can come to Europe. The kids love it. And it's a very, very cool 6 weeks. It's a lot of fun. There's all sorts going on. I did some amazing things. I took young kids deep sea fishing. We saw whales breaching the ocean and all these sorts of things. We camped out, we canoed, we did everything that you could possibly have done away from your mum and dad. And all I wanted to do when I came back was go back. All I wanted to do when I came back was go and be a camp counsellor again, because I'd worked my way up inside and I had quite a lot of responsibility by the time I left. So I applied for a job. I applied for anything that was commission or sales because I knew that was probably what I should be in. I applied for double glazing jobs. I applied for jobs like that. And I ended up with two of my very influential mentors in my early working life. The first one I still see for lunch. So bear in mind, I applied for this job in 1979. And I failed every single selection criteria that these people had. You were supposed to be over, if I can remember them all, you're supposed to be over 25. I was 22. You're supposed to be married, so you had commitments. I was very single. I was supposed to have a car. I didn't have a car. You're supposed to own your own house. I didn't own my own house. I was sharing the bedroom with my brother at my mum and dad's house, and I can't. Oh, yeah, and you're supposed to have a good bank reference. Well, I didn't have a good bank reference because I'd just been a student for 3 years and gone to the States, so I had an unpaid overdraft. So I had 5 black marks against my name. And the way that well, I won't go into too much detail on it, but I was interviewed by a lad called Alistair Niven, a chap called Alistair Niven, and really got on well with him, still get on well with him. And he said to his boss, he said, right, okay, you need to interview this guy. He said, well, has he passed the criteria? He says he hasn't passed any of the criteria. He says, but you need to interview this one. And the reason it was important is because if I passed the criteria, the company would pay my wages. If I failed the criteria, my boss had to pay my wages.
Right.
So it was a big
commitment.
It was a big commitment from him. So that was Alistair Niven working with a guy called Doug Roberts. So Alistair Niven was brilliant in that it was part of a team that taught you which knife and fork to hold, which wine to drink, because they were moving you. They were part of the team that were moving you around socially because you were going to become a financial advisor, and the object of the exercise was to deal with people that had money. Normally, a lot more money than you had. There was nobody going in there with lots of money to take money off their peers. We were all trading up. So that was Nibs, and he looked after us. Doug Roberts was the guy that you saw on the stage with the white suit. He was the guy. He was I don't want to say kind of the preacher that you'd see. He's the guy you would see on an American sales type program. And he was mad about goals. Goals, 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 goals. I don't know whether they know SMART. Remember SMART goals?
Yeah.
Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound.
Yeah, that's something that's his work with sport, isn't it?
That's right. And he put that in. He put that in our lives. We would have pictures of houses, pictures of cars, because literally we started making 100 phone calls. 100 phone calls a week. I can remember the figures: 100 phone calls, 10 appointments, 8 would be there, 6 would be okay, and 2 would buy. If 2 bought, you earned £300 a week, which was £15,000, which was survival. And if you could survive the first 18 months, then you'd go back to the existing clients. And these guys gave me that break.
I mean, you just leveled up from that.
So, but at the back of my mind, my dad was still there, and he hated this job. He'd worked really hard, if you think about it, to get me to a grammar school, to be a solicitor. And what was I doing? I was literally knocking on doors selling life assurance, but I was doing okay. So what did I become? The first opportunity I got, I became a manager, a sales manager. And for that, I got a little bit of a salary and I got a car allowance. I could tell my dad I had a company car. And I could tell my dad I had a job because I'd now moved from self-employed to employed, and I had a bit of a salary and a bit of commission. And he was happy. I wasn't. The reason I wasn't happy is because I wanted to be scoring the goals. I wasn't ready for that reflected glory about being a great manager where people are going out and doing. I wanted to be the lad at the top of that was winning the prizes. And so I did that I did the manager thing for 2 years. And I was pretty good at it. There's still people out there that are advisors to this day. I've been speaking to a couple of them today. But what I did was I came back into financial services. I came back into selling. But I worked a system with a buddy of mine whereby we invested in seminars, and we would have 100 companies in a hotel room, and we would tell them how to extract money from their companies. And we built this machine, and we did it all over the country. But the problem with that is financial services per se is repetitive. If you've got a high boredom threshold in sales, you can earn a lot of money because if you find something that works, you just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. But the problem I was having out-of-body experiences in meetings. I'm going, did I just say that? Have I already said that to him? Did I ask him that question? And I'll tell you why it was. At that moment in time, I was doing that to earn money. I wasn't doing it to help the person I was talking to. So I was on this thing that was saying, this is a way to earn money. I can earn more money. I can earn more money. I can earn more money. I was single. I didn't have any responsibilities. And I hadn't really matured. I might have been 27, 28, but I don't think I was very mature at 27, 28. I was single. I was living the life of Riley. I was driving around in a nice car. I was living in a nice house. But I was going through the motions. I wasn't ready to settle down. I didn't want a wife. I didn't even have any idea about kids. I knew I'd have kids sometime, but I had no desire to have kids. And so what happened was I went back into management. So I was a bit of a butterfly going, oh, I don't like that and I don't like this. But this time I went into management and something big happened in the industry. Something really, really big happened in the industry. And that is a company it's now called St. James Place. It's the biggest, probably one of the biggest investment companies in the UK. But at the time, the money was put up by somebody called Jacob Rothschild. Now, if you think about where I'd come from, I was now working for the Rothschilds. And one day, Jacob came up and opened our office. And one day, Leslie went to the airport in my fancy company car and picked up Lord Rothschild in the car. And he came to open the office for Tony Smith from Trafford Park. And you're going, it's all right, isn't it? I had a night with him at his house, not just me, about 10, 15 of us. And it was the night, I remember this, you won't remember this, but at some stage, the House of Lords lost all its power. So it's only titular, really. There's not a lot goes on, and a lot of people got kicked out. And this was the day that the House of Lords he got kicked out of the House of Lords this day. And he said, quite right too, I'm never there, and this, that, and the other. They're all wasting their time, so on and so on. Maybe not be able to use that one. I'd got to that place, but now I was in the corporate world. It was political. It was cutthroat. I believe to this day, that there was one person in that organisation that was delivering things to me late on purpose. If I rewind a little bit, they took me out of the sales force in Manchester and they made me marketing director at head office. So I now jumped from sales into head office, where I was responsible for all the brochures, I was responsible for product launches, I was responsible for 101 things that I'd never ever done before. But what I really missed was the sales guys. It was like being back at university.
Would you relate, like, say, like the sales type of environment to maybe like a sporting environment?
100%.
Yeah, and like, you know,
Achievement. Yeah, it's. I used to say, even to the managers that work for me, I said, as long as you get your work done and you hit your targets, I don't care what hours you work. Now, some people, in order to hit their targets, need to work 50 hours a week. Some people need to work 20 hours a week. It's a results-based
game.
It's a results-based game. And if you are... So let's say you're super talented and you find it easy and you meet people and this, that, and the other. Well, you've got a choice, haven't you? You can either earn X and work 20 hours a week, 25 hours a week, or you can earn 2X and earn 30 or 40 hours a week. So, but the great thing about running your own business, if we come to that, because all my lads were self-employed, you have that choice. You have that choice. And if you flip into coaching and helping people, people just need to make their mind up. I want to earn a good living in a 30-hour week, or I want to earn an amazing living in a 60-hour week.
But that comes with other sacrifices then, though, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Like what you were just talking about before, about maybe your health and well-being. There's an element of, all right, I want to earn this amount of money, I want to achieve all these things, and I want to take on all this stress to do so, to become that person. But then that'll have a knock-on effect, whether that's in your home life, whether that's with your health and well-being and stuff like that. And it's very hard to kind of like balance the two, isn't it, at times, do you know what I mean?
It is hard, but I don't think it's impossible.
No, of course, yeah. That was obviously then the next phase for you was what you did after. Well, you can tell the stories after you had a bit of an illness that you.
Yeah, no, it was interesting. So what happens when you're employed? It doesn't matter how. I mean, I had 2 company cars. Yeah. So this is looking good so far. Yeah. So you've got 2 company cars. We only took one because it was a ridiculous tax bill to have another one. And we were earning a lot of money. Everything was provided for, all those sorts of things. But I started to realise that my future was being decided in 10 minutes once a year. In the powers that be, the board, would have a conversation about promotions and about more responsibility and about all those sorts of things. And if you weren't headed for the big job, they would give you the absolute minimum pay rise that wasn't an insult. So literally you would get, and I know it's all relative, but you would literally get 5-6%, and you might get a slightly bigger pension contribution, this, that, and the other. But you felt that they were manipulating you, and the other thing that you felt is that they owned you, in that they absolutely controlled what you were doing and how you were doing it and how you're perceived and all those sorts of things. But when you're in it, you don't see it. And literally, I was working 62, 63, 64 hours a week. I had my son, Max, at the time. And I'm one of those people, I sleep a lot more than I used to these days, but I would get by on 5 hours sleep. He was a newborn baby, so when he woke up, I would get up, I would feed him, I'd put him in the cot downstairs, and I would start work. I'd start work at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'd do 2 to 3 hours between 5 o'clock and 8 o'clock. All I was doing was checking business. I was just signing off the advice that the guys had been given. And I had a great relationship with him because I saw a lot of him. But I couldn't, so I would do that. 8 o'clock, I'd drive in the awful traffic that you've just been in. So I'd go in the awful traffic. The best thing we did was we'd go to the gym before we went to the office. That was the best thing. And I don't know if you remember living well in Key Street in Sunlight House. We'd go in there and we'd go in our scruffs. We'd go to the gym. We'd get a shower and we'd walk into the office at 9:15. But we wouldn't leave the office till 7 o'clock. So, long story short, every year to motivate the troops, we took them somewhere special. And on this occasion, we took them to the West Palm Beach, I think, on the west coast of Florida. We were in the most amazing hotel. And we did silly things, organised silly things. We also did silly things, but we did organised silly things. A thing called the Beach Olympics, which was what would have been termed in American speak as colour wars, where you do all these difficult games and fun games on the beach, and one office would win. And it was important that your office won. So our office won. And then I was upstairs getting ready to just have the last day. And I looked down at my leg and I looked down at I was sat on the loo. And I could see my foot and I could see a toe. And the toe was black. Now, I'm sure everyone in this room has broken a toe. Sore, innit? It hurts, doesn't it? It's really remarkable. A little thing like that can hurt that much. This toe didn't hurt. It didn't hurt at all. It looked like the worst broken toe you'd ever had in your life. But it was black as anything and it didn't hurt, and I hurt her. Then I looked down at my thigh and I've got little speckles of blood on my thigh. And so I know what you're expecting now, that is I would wipe those spots of blood off my leg and there'd be scratches underneath from what we've been doing during the day. There was literally not a scratch in sight. I was literally leaking blood. My blood was coming through my skin. My blood was all in my toe. And I knew there was something wrong. I knew there was something wrong. I'd been feeling a bit off, but nothing bonkers. And it was the last day of the conference, and there was normally people are going by all the presents and so on and such forth. So I put Leslie in a taxi with all her friends to go shopping, and I gave the head of the conferences the curly finger and says, right, I need to see a doctor. So he says, right, what's the matter? I said, well, there's something going on. I don't know what it is. He says, well, I can't get into a doctor, but I can get you into a hospital. So we went to a hospital, and they thought I had leukemia. Did they think I had leukemia? They had to rule out leukemia. So I didn't know this, and probably nobody listening to this knows this, but what happens with leukemia is you lose your platelets. I didn't know this either, that platelets are the bits of your blood that make it clot. So they started pumping me full of platelets, and the platelet count wouldn't go up. That is a serious indication that you've got leukemia. They gave me a lumbar puncture to take some bone marrow. That's also a pretty weird experience. But thankfully I was in America and I had the results in about 3 hours. It confirmed what I knew. I did not have leukemia. But the quicker they put those platelets in, the quicker whatever was in me was eating them. And they could never, ever explain what it was. It's called an ITP, which means it's something they can't explain. Now, post-event, I explain it. I'm exhausted. Anybody knows that when you're exhausted, what happens to your immune system? This is the doctor explained this. I'd worked it out. Your immune system drops and bugs come in. The doctor said to me, he said, you've got the biggest Pac-Man I've seen in a while, and it's eating all your platelets. You cannot go anywhere until we've got rid of this. So they just pumped me full of steroids and platelets for the next 4 or 5 days. So it got me back. It got me able to travel back. I wasn't fully signed off yet. And I'm a lucky guy because, one, I could have got back on the plane in that ill health state. Imagine what could have happened going on a long flight where you're bleeding to death inside. So something, and I'm not a particularly sensible person. I'm not a particularly cautious person, but something on that day said I'm not getting on that flight. So that was that thing. I'm also lucky in that I got back and I was being treated at Withington. I was still on steroids through Withington. And a guy that came back with the same as me lost a kidney. So all this has happened. I go, you need to have a word with yourself. They're manipulating you, or they're taking advantage of you. You are a mug and you're working 60 hours a week and you're not seeing your little boy and you're not seeing your wife and you know. So I started at that stage, got back going, and over the next 12 months I negotiated my way out of a big corporate position. There is a story behind that, but I'll just carry on. But the bit of my job that I loved was coaching the self-employed guys. That was the time that I was happy and I was good at it. I'd also started to take on information in that space as opposed to the technical space of financial this and compliance that and so on and so forth. So I realised that what I wanted was to be able to help people in this space, to help my guys with a target, to help them achieve more in less time without having to end up in hospital in order to realise which way is up.
One thing I wanted to touch on there, because obviously you're reflecting now on your life, do you have any regrets, or do you think it was worth sacrificing your health, time with family, time with friends for you? It's obviously the corporate world and climbing your way up the corporate ladder, but maybe for us to be business, because I'm in a position myself at the minute where I sacrifice pretty much everything for my own business.
Yeah.
And I'm not yet, 20, 30 years ahead to see what's going to happen, either to my health or, to anything. Would you say it was worth it, or do you regret it, in a sense?
Well, the great thing about where I was the managing director, who I'm still very close to, was bonkers about personal development. He was mental for it. He built this training centre like you wouldn't believe. I've been on Dartmoor, jumping out of helicopters, just so they can melt you down. Just so they can melt you down. And that was him. We were sales managers. And he's devoting all this time to get us into a situation on Dartmoor where we melt down and the true person comes out like that. Now, I would have never had that exposure to true personal development had I not been in a corporate, because I couldn't afford it. The only reason I spent so much on my own and Max's personal development was because of that. I don't think so I think I couldn't have had that. So whether the sacrifice is worth it, what I can guarantee is that you can catch up. You can catch up. What you have to be is conscious.
Yeah, I think to achieve anything, you have to have sacrifice.
Yeah.
To get to any point where you can look back and go, or reflection of where you've come from or where you're at there, and maybe there was a big negative period in that time, but there was many a positive to be able to progress you to where you are now. I think you have to sacrifice certain things to be able to achieve anything. Whether that's fitness related, whether that's sport related, whether that's business related, career related, you do have to sacrifice, but there is a point at which you have obviously clearly got to where there's a realisation point, especially when it comes to career, really, where you've got to look at it and go, what am I doing this for?
Yeah.
What am I doing this for? Where am I going with this? Do you know what I mean? And I think a lot of people get caught up in the fact of they stay in that sticky job, they stay in that rut, they stay in that little thing where it's just killing them inside to the point where they get so demoralised, and then the confidence starts to go, and then next minute they haven't really got anything for themselves, and they're kind of stuck into that position. Do you know what I mean?
I think you've got to look at your situation sometimes from the outside in.
Yeah,
Take a step out of what you're doing and look at it from like a third person point of view. Because sometimes, like you say now, you can get caught up in it massively.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to touch on as well is you mentioned a couple of mentors there that you had, obviously throughout your younger years, and you still speak to one of them to this day. How impactful was that for you to have someone, maybe you are definitely not in your family, guide you through life and teach you things that maybe would have took you years to learn yourself?
It's huge, but it probably the biggest thing was somebody else having belief in you, a belief that you can do it. And that was probably my first boss, Doug, who supported me financially, but he did it because in the end I was successful. The end of that story, you know, my dad was disappointed about me being not being a solicitor. So I was lucky enough to buy a house. Do you know the Green at Worsley at all? You might not know it. Yeah.
It's nice on there.
I bought a house on there, and I had a housewarming, and my dad was the quietest man, not like me at all. And he was so quiet. He walked up to Doug, the white suit man, who probably had a white suit on this day because it was a beautiful summer's day. I can't believe this happened. He offered Doug his hand and he said, "Thank you for proving me wrong." And I go, goodness me, you know, it would have taken him. He used to do judo. He was a judo guy, and it would have taken him more courage than he ever had to demonstrate on a dojo, in a dojo. That for him to do that with somebody that's like larger than life, and my dad was a service manager, I was staggered. It's probably one of the proudest days of my life when he walked up to him and said, "You proved me wrong. Thank you." But so Doug was huge, but Doug was just single dimension, which is often very useful. He was all about goals. It was all about goals, more and more about goals, more and more about goals. The key thing with a mentor or a coach is that bit where they go, "This is how to do it. Try this. Talk in this way." And one of the biggest things that I was taught, it was because I was like, you know, rugby player, quite determined, this, that, and the other. So I was making sales. And in financial services, people have what's called a stat notice, which is your right to withdraw from a contract. If you sign any contract in finance, you get the right to it. You put it the right to you and say, "Oh, it's not very good what you got. Do you want to continue with it?" And the managers were so frustrated because it was a race between the stat notice and me as to who got to the office first. So I would make, let's say, 5 sales in a week, and only one of them would go ahead. Why was that? Is because some idiot trainer has said, the way that you work this is you take 5 no's. You put 5 crosses at the top of your page, and if you get to 5, you leave. Idiot. The person that taught me was the person that taught me how to ask questions. That was it. The biggest thing, well, 1, ask questions. 2, listen to the answer. And the question you had to ask is what's called an open-ended question. And if you take nothing else out of listening to this, open-ended questions. How are you? What are you up to? How are you feeling? So those
Sales though, isn't it? Leave them to it as well.
No, it's not only sales. If you go to a decent counsellor, they'll ask you the same. They'll ask you the same question. If you go to any counsellor, you watch. They ain't asking closed questions, and a closed question is a question you answer with a yes or a no. If you're not going, that conversation's not going to go anywhere. So I've spent many years demonstrating open questions, but getting the people I'm responsible for helping grow their businesses to just use open-ended questions about what is it, how is it, not necessarily why.
No, an open-ended question then that's coming next for me is, how did you create your current family business? What is your current family business?
Right, okay. So my first sortie into coaching was very successful, but got wiped out by the 2008 downturn in business generally. So I had a lot of corporate clients that were paying significant amounts for me to ask all these open-ended questions. So that got wiped out, but I had my financial services business. So the financial services business survived the downturn. The coaching business didn't. So we created a hybrid, which was, rather than just sell products to people, pensions, life assurance, all those sorts of things, what we did was we worked really hard with them on what they really wanted out of life. So we trained with an organization in San Diego, and they specialized in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So we were probably one of the first sets of financial advisors that would not just ask, what are your goals, what are this, what are that, when do you want to retire, all those sorts of things. We would take them through a value solicitation process, which is what's important about success, what's important about money to you. And what they trained us in San Diego, worst places to get trained, of course, was to ask the question, shut up and listen, and write down the answer, feed back the answer to make sure you'd heard it, and then you ask them what's important about that to you. And I'd shut up like the way I did there. And I'd put my pen down and I would wait for the person to answer the question. And I would be genuinely interested in taking that person through the 3 levels of Maslow. And that's where I became really interested in the start of Maslow was fantastic. But about the same time as I got into Maslow, I was ill. So I was training the Maslow stuff into the sales guys. I wasn't necessarily, because I thought it was revolutionary. But when I became ill, I left my role with the guys. But when I was in hospital, I read Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman, and that, for me, compartmentalized probably what I didn't know I was good at, which was somehow if you were to rank me on the emotional intelligence scale, I'd be a lot closer to the top than the bottom. And that's probably what had started happening when I was 11, that I was going to go into this posh place and I was going to cope in the posh place. And I was going to cope when I was 27th in the class, but I could be popular. I was also lucky in that I was one of the bigger guys as well. So I wasn't very good at football, but I was good at other stuff. So So I think that the emotional intelligence piece is huge.
Oh yeah, well, that's obviously you mentioned emotional intelligence. Then I think that's something that I mean, I try and even like use with some of my clients. Like obviously, everyone's got different needs.
Yeah.
And obviously, ours is fitness and giving them that a physical change, but also within that, like some of the conversations that you can have with clients, whether that's even online or that's face to face, to help build people's emotional intelligence in a sense and being able to deal with situations a bit better by building, not necessarily some of it on the surface is the confidence and their self-belief and their own self-worth, identity, which can come from the physical aspects of it, but then also when you're in these conversations, you can refer back to them and be like, well, now look what you've overcome here. Now look what you're dealing with here.
100%.
They're telling you about their work situation. They're telling you about their home life situations. And then you kind of building that. And I do think to be a good coach in any sector, you have to have decent emotional intelligence to be able to work with people one-on-one and help them through situations that are going through. Because if you haven't got that, you might as well open a textbook, use AI. You might as well use whatever resources that are in your fingertips and just go with that. You don't need nobody to be, coaching you through things or telling you anything. You come into somebody like us, all of us, to be able to actually get something from that person, and that comes through the emotion. You can't replicate that. No AI can give you that. No textbook can give you that. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's amazing that you've been able to, monetize that in a sense and sell it alongside a financial advisory business with your whole family as well.
Yeah, I think so we talk about open-ended questions, and so as a coach, you can ask, what do you want to achieve today, or what is your goal, and so on and so forth. But I think the question that's often missed is, how are you feeling? And you look at the people in the room, how good are we at discussing our feelings? It's not something we naturally talk about. I think as coaches, both physical and business wise, feelings are probably the biggest thing to help people manage to some extent, because if they can come back to you and they're feeling proud of what they've done in the week because they've done 3 extra sessions, or they're feeling a little miserable because they wanted to do 3 but they've only done 1, then I think that this whole emotional piece is probably going to be a huge area over the next 15, 20 years.
I think so. I think a lot of the messaging that's put out there right now doesn't dial into that.
Yeah.
It doesn't talk about that enough. Do you know what I mean? And we've spoken a few times, haven't we, about just having them, you set your little goal.
Yeah.
And the feeling that you get from achieving the goal is more important than the physical development you've got from it. You're more important than maybe getting, an extra bounce of muscle on. Do you know what I mean? It's more of that habit building and that emotional feeling that you're proud of yourself. And that's very important, I think, mentally.
But if you can have those, if any of us can have those conversations with people and recognise their achievements and make them feel proud, then guess what? It's a chemical reaction. They're going to have endorphins squirting around their veins. So this is the whole thing we're saying about talking to people on the bus, and random acts of kindness or random acts of recognition, or that moment when somebody says, when somebody says to you, you look amazing, you must have worked really hard on it. I can promise you, if it's genuine and you've been genuine with it and it's not just fluff, then that guy's going to be coursing endorphins round his veins. And I think that if we as a group of people, or we as a generation, or we, whatever we is, just started taking responsibility for how other people feel, this piece of research that I've come across that says when you make somebody else feel good, you feel better. So you don't have to wait for, you know, that piece, well, if I'm nice to you, you'll be nice to me, that kind of reciprocation piece. You don't need that reciprocation piece. You doing a random act of kindness, or you doing a hi, how are you? Or how are you today? Or remembering somebody's name, or whatever it is, will not only make them feel better, but it will get those endorphins coursing around your veins as well. And I think I was staggered when that message came out from that course I was doing in Yale, because some of us do it naturally and say good morning, walk past somebody on your own dog walk, this, that, and the other, and you don't know why you do it, but actually you now been told that you did it because actually you feel better doing it.
Yeah.
But actually they feel better doing it as well.
One thing I wanted to ask you before we wrap up, and go into as much detail as you want on this, what's your best piece of advice for a young business owner or entrepreneur?
This might sound crazy. Read or listen. So I think, if you can find time to listen to a book that's relevant, I think it's as good as going to the gym. So I get out. So I've started running again, as he knows. So I would not run without my headphones. It's not a run really, but go on. Or I'm trying to get my youngest to do this, which is just put his headphones in when he's on the tube in the morning, he's on the train in the morning. If you can listen to either an uplifting book or something you're keen on every day for 15 or 20 minutes, then that'll transform you. Even if it's only the fact that when you get to wherever you get to, your energy level is no longer 7, it's 9. But there are books out there that will help you achieve your goals.
Top 3 books on personal development, what would they be?
Well, you've got to start, you start at the beginning. You start at the beginning and you want to know is where you want to start. So that's a tough question for me. It depends who I'm answering the question for. I'm not avoiding it. If you go right back to the start, Dale Carnegie, How to Make Friends and Influence People. It's simple, it's cliched, it's 50 years old, it's 60 years old, but it's this piece of how to relate to people. And then there's ever so many versions of his book out there. Not an easy, and this is when, if you get, so that's an easy, that's a day oneer. Yeah, so you can pick that up off the shelf, and that will make a difference. That will make a difference to your life. I'm trying to think of a decent book on goals, but I can't. There isn't these are really old, because these are the books that I read. So you bear in mind, these were foundational books for me in the 1970s and 80s.
It doesn't really change though, does it?
It doesn't. But I think guys would find them, I think people today would find them a bit slow, clunky, and this, that, and the other. I think writing, like a lot of things, has changed. So I would look at anything that's going to help me with goals. I'm listening to a couple of books at the moment. The other one that is obvious is Daniel Goleman. Changed my life. Emotional Intelligence. So, and the title of that book is Emotional Intelligence: Why the Most Intelligent People Are Not the Richest or the Most Successful. Because everybody thinks in order to be successful, you need to be intelligent, i.e. you need to be able to answer maths questions, or you need to be able to write an essay. You needed to be clever at school. We all know that's not true. because all the cleverest kids at school are not in the best roles. But who are? Yeah? So it's the guys with the EQ. So anything on emotional intelligence, you can, wherever you are, if you're a 5 on emotional intelligence, you can get to 8. So I would read absolutely everything on emotional intelligence. And dig. So I've brought some books in here. This guy Mark Brackett, he is the head of emotional intelligence at Yale. So one of the greatest universities in the world. I'm doing a course with him. It costs me £36 a month to do a course at Yale. That's bonkers, isn't it? It's absolutely bonkers. Now, it's not live. It's him recording, but he's talking to me and he's talking me through his book. And I've got exercises and I've got an answer machine and I've got to answer it and so on and such forth. And it gets marked, but it's all AI. But I feel as though I'm participating with this guy.
This is now, like, say, a different, say, level now of, say, what was delving into the online world, delving into that online coaching for people. See, that's the resource of that for somebody to have self-development in this, well, to improve themselves. There's no excuse for it, really, is there? Do you know what I mean? If you can access something of that quality.
Yeah, but they don't.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
But that's where our value is. It's exactly what we're saying about the lads with no dads, and all those sorts of things. What do you say to them? At the moment, you'll say whatever comes naturally to us in everything that our life has taught us about this and that. And you're asking me my experiences, and I'm happy to share them. But now my experiences are more, because I've really upped the ante in the last year. There's, I tell you, there's if I can remember her name, because she, what's she called? Brené Brown. She is on TED everywhere. So you can see there's so many resources in this space. And she talks about shame. She talks about people being me shaming people, or me being ashamed, and this, that, and the other. And she says she gets engaged for a talk. She said, "What are you going to talk about?" And she goes, "Shame." And she said, "No, you can't talk about shame." And you read what she's doing, and we've changed what we do at work in terms of our creating accountability. She's got this idea of a rumble, and the rumble is the sort of thing you'd have with a client. You say, "Well, what am I going to rattle like that person's cage?" It's a non-emotional discussion with somebody that you care for, without the emotion. You create a parenthesis, or you create a safe space, and say, "Well, can we have a discussion around this?" And That's
an interesting subject that you just said, shame, there, because this is something that I feel like a lot of people within our industry sell.
Yeah.
They sell shame. Do you not feel like that? I really do. I feel like there's so much online now at the moment, so many people that are out there that are talking absolute nonsense. Yeah. To be able to create people who are emotionally unintelligent and weaker to buy into their bullshit. Do you know what I mean? They're trying to, on a mass production,
100%.
Shame people into making them feel like that person is better than me. I need to be like that person. And I've categorically, I see right through it, and I've seen right through it from day dot with this in this online world. And I can't stand, I would never be like that person. I could never promote that and be like that person. And that's why I've took my time in getting into the online world, due to the fact of I've seen all these mentors and this, that, and the other advertising this ethos of this is how you got to do it because it's how I make money. And that's not how I'm going to make money, because to me that morally doesn't stand right with me. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like that's and coaches have done that for however long, haven't they? You know, shaming people. You know, you've heard stories, people walking into the gym and people like, you know, putting people down in a sense. Do you know what I mean? And these might be paying clients, and the people are putting them down to be able to, like, I don't know what that ethos is, but that, I don't think that ever works.
So the secret sauce, or the secret, will be, how can you create accountability, which is what we're talking about to some extent, without shame? And that's going to be the key. Brené's got some of the keys, but I've not found all the answers, because I changed fundamentally. We've been doing the same in sales. I've had people crying in these meetings. I've had people crying, you know, where you said, okay, well, last week you said you were going to do 8 appointments and you've done 6. And I wouldn't say anything. And particularly the male-female thing is interesting in that regard. And when tears have happened, I've been genuinely curious as to why tears happened. I said, I didn't say anything. She said, it was in your eyes. It was in your eyes. So she was looking, I'm saying, how's your week gone? And this, that, and the other. Said, your eyes told me everything that you were thinking. And it's so true. It's so true. So one of the things we're going to have to learn is control what our eyes are saying. Control what our eyes are saying.
There's a fine line there, though, isn't there? Because obviously, like, if there's goals to be hit as well, you should have some form of, you know, accountability. All right, then shame, whatever. You're shamed that you didn't do it, but if you don't do it, then
I think
if you didn't have an element of that, nothing would ever get done, would there?
Well, maybe it would, but
because not everyone's self-motivated. Not everybody's got that element in them to be able to go, I need to do that. Some people need a push.
Yeah.
But not shaming into it. It should be, there's an element of coaching that you don't need to do that with people. Do you know what I mean?
I think there's an element of you just have a personal contract with the person that, well, you have a personal, you have an agreement as to how that person wants to be treated by you. I think I've told you, I've just had a massive fallout with one of my coaches, my paddle coach. And we're now best mate. We're now bezies. It's weird. But I think to some extent he'd just been really horrible to people, and nobody had ever taken him on. No. But he's now, he has changed. But of course, a lot of the time, if you don't tell people that they're doing certain things, then it's an interesting, you know, do you just walk away and never go back to them, or it's, you know.
Of course.
But I think the one thing that I learned on my very first management course, I can remember this as if it were yesterday, and geez, this is 1976. And really good management trainer. And she said, if you're dealing with an advisor or a salesman in these circumstances, and last week he said he was going to do 10 things, and he does 7. What do you concentrate on? And me, macho man at the time, immature, the 3 things he's not done. Of course, completely wrong. The object of the exercise is to get him to 7, to 8, to 9. He might never get to 10, but he'll still have done 9 things.
Don't put him down. Don't put him down.
Well, it's that piece, isn't it? Well, you've done it. What's next?
What's next? Yeah, how can we improve from this point? Yeah. I think that's a good place to wrap it up there.
Wrap it up there.
Brilliant. Okay.
Really appreciate it, mate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All the best.